Hey everybody, Milton Smith here. I'm one of the leads on the JVMXRay project, and I've done a lot of the development work here on JVMXRay. And there's been some interest in the project and what it can do for you. And I think this is I've got a cold. I think this is a pretty terrible video in some ways. I'm not necessarily the best announcer, but I would please bear with me here, and I think I'll get you what you need to know in order to compile JVMXRay from the command line and get it running with a Tomcat server, um, and so you can see what it looks like when it's running. Okay, so with that in mind, um, here we go. Okay, so create a temporary folder here. Then change into your temp folder. Grab the JVMXRay project link. Then do git clone and then paste the link. Okay. Okay. And so you see the JVMXRay folder there. And then change directory into the folder. Okay. Now do Maven package. Alright. Okay, and there you can see the two jars that we just built. And let's see. Oops. Go into our folder here. And those are the two jars right there. Just grab this one with dependencies and copy it. And then let's see, let's go over to our web server. So I've got Tomcat installed. And I got this xlib directory that I created earlier. I'm just showing you how to do it. I already have one running here. You can replace it. Yeah. You also, in Tomcat, there's docs that explain how to get Tomcat set up, but you can go into the bin folder for Tomcat, and you do need to create this setenv.sh file. I'll show you what that looks like. But it just contains the Catalina home, which is your directory where you have Tomcat deployed, and then you need to set a class path here, and so I just grab whatever the existing class path is, and then include the Catalina home, and then the xlib, the directory that I created, along with my jar that has the dependencies. And then I also create a export Catalina ops. So I take the existing one, and to that I also include this -d option, which is very important to run the security manager, the null security manager. Okay, so that's the sh file here. Let's see. The other thing that's kind of handy is just to delete your Catalina out if it's not important to you. So that way when you start Tomcat, you don't get confused any log messages that you from previous runs. So now if we change over to the Tomcat folder with our shell, let's see, okay, Apache. Okay, now to start Tomcat, you just do a start. Let's see here. sh. So you just go ahead and run that. And again, this is not like let's not call this like a real deployment here, but it at least runs some of the examples. So if we want to see the Tomcat examples, we can just go to localhost 8080, and we're going to see those pop up here. Okay, now, so now the interesting thing here is JVMXRay is, because of our property settings that I pointed to earlier, is already running, and many calls were made to the security manager here to actually bring up this page, many different privilege calls. So what we can do to see those is, let me add another shell up here. So add a new tab, and if we change over to our folder where we built, so if we go change directory to temp, and then to JVMXRay, okay, and then to target where our jar was. Let's see. Okay, now if we do, let's see, Java, class path, JVMXRay jar with dependencies, and then let's say we give it the name of the class file here. So let's in the code that we downloaded, what we're going to do here is we're going to run the console adapter. So I'm showing you how to do that. So what we're going to do is, just to make sure I got the right class name here, so we'll go run org OWASP JVMXRay adapters dot JVMXRay console adapter. Okay, org OWASP JVMXRay adapters JVMXRay console adapter. Okay, and let's give that a shot. Okay, and there you go. You see a bunch of console messages being logged right there. Now, what you're seeing here is all the different console messages that have been logged since Tomcat started. I'll explain what's going on after we just kind of confirm everything is working okay, but what I wanted to show you is how you can get this thing, JVMXRay, started up, in part, how you can build it from the command line, and how you can deploy the jar within Tomcat 9.031, which I'm running here. And then beyond logging, how you can get it to pull all these different messages out of it here that you can see on my screen. So what happens is that the deployment, or the collection of messages or events, is separate and distinct from the logging or processing of those events. And so in the first part of it, once we started up Tomcat, a bunch of messages or events were logged, and then later on, when we ran the adapter here, you noticed a great many of them, careening across my screen here. And then they've stopped right now at this check permission on set contacts class loader. But if we go in here and we start running some examples, you'll notice some things have happened here. We've got a socket accept event. which is sort of doing something with not a very standard IP address, I guess. Not sure quite what that is. Um, we've got some permission checks. One thing to keep in mind when you're looking at this information is even a single activity like opening up a socket from your code can generate many different calls to protected resources. And so sometimes even a small activity over here in the web browser translates to many, many different events being processed. And the salient part of that is that you can choose to filter on these however you want. The one thing you didn't notice me doing when I got into this system is actually setting any permissions, and that's sort of on purpose because we want people to be able to get up on the test configuration here very easily and get going. But what you can do is you can just grab a JVMXRay properties from the source build. So normally all these properties here, when you build the software, whatever is in these properties by default is popped into the jar file. But you can, of course, copy these properties into a directory that you include in your class path somewhere, and you can go ahead and edit them, and these are what they look like. All these, like I had mentioned before, are designed to work out of the box for unit testing, so we can make sure we don't break anything in JVMXRay, and also for you, and help you get successful quickly with minimal amount of changes, and then you can begin making changes and improvements to work best with your site. But here's sort of what they look like, and it's just kind of picking a smattering of different events and which filter should use them, how you want to handle those events. Let's see. And as you can see, when I click around here a little more, there's more permission checks and things that are being issued over here. Do privilege calls, file permission checks, read. So here you can see we've got read permission that was issued to an Apache folder in a file called local strings en us dot properties at the read level. Okay, and that's it. It's operating at this point, and you can see the different commands sort of stream across the screen here. It goes pretty fast. From an application or an architectural perspective, I had mentioned there's the collecting of events. That's the null security manager that gets loaded into your Apache server. And then on this screen over here, we're seeing the adapter that pulls those events out as they're logged. So let's see. So by default, JVMXRay creates as your server is starting up, creates a SQLite database, a very lightweight database that's typically used just for cellular phones and mobile devices, but it needs some basic services to transaction type services to be able to spool events very quickly as the server is starting up, and then later process them as the app has time to pull things out and send them to your security and event management tools and that sort of thing, or centralized logging service, whatever you use. But that's the log right there. And so when you start up the console adapter, same thing, it read the properties file that I showed you earlier, just like the null security manager did, to understand where its spool file is located, and then how to go in there and grab these messages out and process them. In this case, just very simply to print them out on my screen, which is something good for diagnostics purposes. You could always redirect that stream somewhere else. But also there's other adapters that are more specialized that can handle these events in other ways too. Um, and that's really it for now. That's what you need to get yourself started and get successful using JVMXRay. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.